So Reid just sold a software company to a bank for a reported $200 million, which in my circles is basically in like 6 years as a CTO. Like that is basically, I don't know, the software kind of entrepreneurial circles. I mean, if you guys went public first or like after, that would be maybe cooler. But like, other than that, that's pretty baller. So this is our friend. I know him from the Marine Corps, and Eric knows him from the restaurant, I believe.
Yeah.
Right?
We go
so
way back.
Like our buddy just kind of, I don't know, he went to the NBA and like had an awesome season. What's the equivalent of software?
Well, it's first of all, it's kind of crazy, I have to say. I mean, it's a hard thing to process, and we're still going through it. So we, I think, announced a couple of weeks ago. But in terms of like the entrepreneurial journey, it's definitely been a crazy 6-7 years going through this. And I think that it is something that I'm very thankful for as an experience. I learned like a whole lot about a whole lot of different things. And it's been pretty cool. And so getting to this point, I think, I have an advisor, and he once told me like the company is your baby. And for TravelBank, which, started 6 years ago with 2 people, now the company sort of went into its infant stages. It crawled a little bit, then it learned to walk. Now it went through high school, and now we're actually going and graduating into college. And so in the same way that you think about something that you're building and growing, it's just kind of going to be the next iteration of that. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it, and it really helps me put some context about how I think about things.
Like at what point in that kind of progression is there like no longer any real instructions? Like the books don't really, you can't go like reference this business model in a book, and you kind of realize that, all right, we're basically kind of, I don't want to say making this up as we go, but like there's too many variables here, and like life and, growing a business is like more complicated, and you kind of have to, is it intuition, or do you follow the instructions somewhere? How do you run a company and sell it to a bank? Tell us, Reid.
There are no instructions, number one. I think I'll give you another analogy. And so I guess let me walk through a couple of those things there, because you unpacked a few things, I think. One is the different stages of the journey. I'll be happy to talk through like how I see that, because I've actually been talking about it a lot lately. Also kind of internally with the company, I try to encourage people to think about it the same way. But in terms of the instructions, there are none, right? And what I was told by the same advisor that I just gave you this other analogy, he told me that when you are building a startup and you're going through this journey, it's like you're in the middle of the jungle and all you have is a machete, right? And you're hacking your way through the jungle, and you know that there's a destination somewhere. But how do you get there? Well, number one, you just don't stop, right? You have to not give up. And number two is you just have to make good decisions along the way to kind of steer the ship in the direction that makes the most sense as you're going through the journey. Because, it's so dynamic. Like the things that you think you know at any given time, 3 months later, 6 months later, something else is going to happen, and you're going to have to adjust. So it's more about that mindset of making small decisions based on what you know at any given time, and then hacking your way through that jungle and doing it in a way that you can bring other people behind you that will follow you. And I think that's how, I think about it at least, and that kind of is how we made it through, I'd say.
Could you maybe tell us or share some of those steps? So the way you described it, infant, walking, crawling.
Can you just give us the steps so we can sell a company to a bank for $200 million? Just write them down.
I mean, in your experience, what were some of those kind of milestone events where you felt like progress was happening and you felt you were going the right direction, and maybe sometimes when you felt like maybe you weren't?
Yeah. So when we started, it was 2 of us, and we were in a boardroom in San Francisco. We had a friend's company. We stayed in the boardroom, and so it was a table. It was a little bit bigger than this table, but it was just the 2 of us who started it. Plus, we had another 2 people 2 or 3 people who were working with us at the time. A couple were remote, and then there was one who was in San Francisco with us. And we're just sitting around this table working together, trying to build something. And it's just kind of funny. I have distinct memories of literally falling asleep on the floor because I'd work so late into the night. I'd fall asleep on the floor, sleep in the office. And the other company, their employees would come in the next morning, and here I am in like the boardroom, passed out. Like, and so that was the very first phase. And that's really, you're trying to find out, you're trying to discover. You have a thesis for what you want to build, and really at that early time, you're trying to validate that thesis so that you can it's really the sort of seed of what's going to come next, right? And so for us, that was this idea that if you took a business trip and we had a budget and we gave you a budget for that trip for what it should cost, we can help reward your employees for making better decisions. And so that's where it started. From there, we actually moved into a 2-bedroom apartment that in San Francisco in a place called South Park. And South Park is really well known for being like in that like 2 or 3 block area. There's thousands and thousands of startups. So it's pretty historic. And in that office, we started to grow the company a little bit more, and we started to grow the product a little bit more. We started building, at that time, it was the expense portion of our business. So we started with this idea of trip rewards and trip savings, and then we realized that you kind of have to have the expense piece to be able to track against that budget. So you know how much your employees are actually spending. And so that was kind of the next phase of the product. Also there, we went through some pretty crazy experiences in terms of the work. It didn't stop. It was continually hustling there as well. I mean, like at one point we were leading up into a launch for our mobile platforms, and in like 3 days I had to figure out how to program in Swift to help out our iOS developers. Like, it was just nuts. And so it was crazy because we were very fortunate in that we launched our app, and at the time the App Store had this thing called New Apps We Love, and we got featured. And so that very first day it was like, wow, like this is crazy. We actually put up like a Twitter wall on the TV, and we were watching all the reactions from it. And because we were right there, first thing that you see when you open the App Store is our app.
Well, how'd that happen? Did you guys...
Blind luck. We had no idea that they were going to do that, and they just put it on there. And I think it was because maybe some of the novelty of this idea that there's these trip rewards and things like that. So maybe that contributed to it. Maybe they liked our design. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But they have a team that reviews these new apps, and they put that there. And by they, I mean Apple. They put that there to promote these newer companies who are coming in. And so we just got lucky.
So so whoever designed and wrote the description for your app store and made the logo, like really you should get a lot of credit because that must have been done well, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The design has always been for us a critical part of what we do. I think I shared a McKinsey study recently. This is a side note, but this McKinsey study stated that the companies who have a better user experience, whether it's hardware, software, or otherwise, will make about 30% more than their competition. And so there's a real business value to having a good design focus, and we've done that since day one, so it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, the three of us were co-founders in a company called Usability Dynamics, so that's kind of I agreed. I wish McKinsey would do more studies because it seems like not everybody's convinced. Well, I guess it's so subjective. But anyway,
well, you can use that in the future as well if you ever need to reference something. I've already done it a few times. Yeah,
strong.
Yeah. How big is your team about this? So you guys launch app, how many people is it? 30
we're like 15, 20, something like that. Yeah, we're all in this 2-bedroom apartment.
What's that saying about opportunity and preparation meet? Luck is when opportunity and preparation meet, right?
Yeah. You can create your own luck in a lot of ways because there was a lot of work that went into that.
Right. Oh, exactly. So it's one of the things it's always hard to do. Like I would imagine having a business is which details are important. Because detail work, you can't really realistically make everything be perfect, right? Because that would just be prohibitively expensive, right? So how do you is that what leadership is? Trying to
I think we said this before. The enemy of great is perfect, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I think we've actually probably shared this between ourselves.
Perfect is the enemy of good.
Yes, something like that. Yeah, something along those lines. But that's what I think you need to have some sort of inherent sense of that for yourself as a entrepreneur, right? What are the objectives you need to achieve, and how do you get there in the most efficient way possible? And you have to be really good at prioritizing things because there definitely is never enough resources, right? You always need help. And that was the thing that I always draw back to the Marine Corps experience, which I always say, like, in the Marine Corps, there's this famous story where, like, a bunch of these Marines have this, all they have is a spoon. And they say, you got to go take this hill. And so the Marines say, okay, well, let's do it. Whatever we got to do, right? All they have is a spoon. They're going to figure it out. And so sometimes it felt like that going through this journey where you just got to figure it out. And it takes a lot of work, like I said, but that mentality will take you a long way too, because nothing is easy. There's always going to be challenges. You just have to be willing to take those on and figure it out, right?
So never give up, basically.
Yeah,
Go
basically.
back to what you said. Just,
Yeah.
Whether it's a spoon or not, just keep digging with your hands, I guess, if you must, right? I mean, but at some point, like, how do you know when you should stop?
Yeah, sure. You got to pull back and.
Well, so let me walk you through the rest of the chapters, because there's other chapters, right? So we were about 15 to 20 people. We kept growing a little bit. We finally got a bigger office, so a real office now. And we hired, we started to grow our sales team at that time. And so this is a period of about 1.5 years, 2 years. We got really good at foosball. So there's that. Yeah. So if we ever play, I might hustle you because I'm pretty good now. But so we were growing through this time, and it was really great. We had a lot of great team members join us, create a lot of great relationships. The team got along really well overall. It wasn't drama free, I'll have to admit that, but I think together we understood what we were trying to do, and we continued growing the business until we were at about 70 or 80 people. And it was about the time that you both actually came out and visited us in San Francisco. We had a big offsite.
It was a really, really good time. We're
yeah.
all so excited, and like you just raised another round of capital.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, this is like, what is it, January 2020?
Yeah,
It's February.
February 2020.
Yeah,
Right
February.
as COVID was slowly seeping into
And
the
then
American conscience.
COVID.
And then COVID, yeah. So we did our company offsite. We had all these grand visions for how we were going to grow and what we were going to do that year. And COVID hits, and all of a sudden, so by the way, so we built the expense piece, then we went into travel, where we started selling travel as a part of our offering so companies could manage their travel a little bit better. And so through that, then we made a lot of our revenue from our travel-based revenue, because we were hooked into all of the different supply inventory systems, and you get a commission from every travel booking. So we would offer our product to our customers for free, and we would make our revenue off of the supplier commissions from the airlines and hotels. And all of a sudden, in a matter of weeks, our revenue dropped about 95%, because it's all based on travel. So travel is completely stopped. And as you can imagine, that was a crazy time. And still, we're still dealing with it. But so what we had to do is we actually had to have some layoffs in the company, right? And that was like terrible, because it was like cutting off your arm to save the rest of your body, right? And as in a position of leadership there, I definitely felt like a lot of responsibility, like going through that, right? That was probably the most challenging time for me, I think, professionally, and in a lot of ways personally as well, right? In terms of just dealing with like the things that come with that, whether it's the guilt or the stress or whatever else that you're dealing with. What we decided to do was pivot our business pretty quickly. We decided to pivot back and focus again on expenses, because we worked on expenses in the beginning. We built up our travel product, and that was selling really well. And then we knew that the travel product was going to be paused. We didn't know for how long. And so we decided to focus back on our expenses and bring that up further. And alongside of that, we also changed our business model to where we're now selling a software license, as opposed to taking a cut of the revenues from our travel suppliers. And so,
Why did you do that?
because travel wasn't selling, we needed to find some way to make revenue or something to sell.
But did you explain what travel was, though? Like, what is this? What was
Well,
the
so
product?
so the product is, if you're a company who uses TravelBank, we help you manage your company travel. So, for example, if you have one card that you want it all to be booked on, or if you need to have travel approvals for flights and hotels, or if you need to set budget policy, like, we help you manage that. And so that's the product, right? And so
Okay, so that's a product, and you sell it to companies.
That's right.
That basically have, like, what size companies did you sell it to?
Well, Yeah, so that's a broad definition. Typically, at the time, I think we were thinking about companies that had less than 10 million in net sales, right? So it's companies that had grown to a point where they, at a certain stage, you don't need travel, but as you get a little bit bigger, you start to have this need to understand how your company is traveling. And so there's also things that come on the back end of this, like reporting, like consolidated reporting. So you can see, okay, how much am I spending? How much was budgeted against what I spent? Where am I spending? Like which hotels, which airlines, etc. And so that is the travel management piece of the product that we have built.
So is it because travel is just like one of those things where like so much of the important transactions are kind of hidden away because like people put them on their own cards?
Yes, that's called leakage. Yeah. So there's a lot of leakage, especially because like when you look at the sort of legacy stuff that's out there in terms of product, it's not very good. It's very hard to use. And so that's where bringing it back to design, it really helps you differentiate yourself. And if you have a better design, then more people are likely to use your product because it's
so it goes
easier
all the way
to
down
use.
to the end user wanting to use it because it's not a pain in the ass.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's very important. And during COVID, that model dried up entirely. So we had to figure out what to do. The focus was to go back to expenses. And so we started working on that. The first couple of quarters where we did this, I mean, there was no revenue. I mean, it was like very hard to come by. I mean, nobody's buying anything. Everyone's really uncertain. The product itself needed 3 to 6 months to develop to a place where we could sell it, actually. And we also had to create the model to sell it. So, meaning what was our pricing structure? Or
hold on, but 3 to 6 months, that's kind of fast.
Well,
I guess you had everybody was working on that one thing, right? Is
right.
that why
yeah.
it's fast?
Well, and also we had already some level of expense product. It wasn't as developed as we wanted it to
without
be.
much revenue coming in because everything was based off of transactions.
Yes,
you guys
that's
getting
right.
a little cut.
Yeah.
So 3 to 6 months is like an eternity.
Well, yeah, because you're basically bleeding the whole time.
Yeah.
But we had some cash reserves that we were able to rely on, and so that's how we made it through, basically, which was on venture capital, right? I mean, that's how it happened.
How big of a bet did that feel like you're making? Like at that point, like I know there's a lot of hard stuff going on with like having to lay off some people, but like, all right, it's all on black kind of. Is that what it felt like with this whole dropping part of the product and building on this one for 3 to 6 months? And how soon would you know if it's working or not?
Yeah. So it's less about putting it all on black. That implies that you're betting. It's a bet in a way, but it's a strategy. It is going back to that mindset of like, okay, how am I going to hack through this jungle? Like you're just making decision based on what you know is right in front of you. And so, you don't know the outcome. You never know the outcome. But you can influence the outcome, and you do that by trying to make good decisions. And so I think we knew pretty quickly after that 3 to 6 months because the sales actually started to pick up. And so in the last year and a half, I would say where we are today is the travel bookings have recovered fully. So we're back to pre-pandemic rates. And we also just about doubled that in terms of our software licenses that we sold. So we actually were able to 2x our business effectively once travel recovered because that all came back.
So the product you built was what was it called?
Which piece?
The one that you had to build basically in a rush, expenses, right?
Yes.
And you're selling that as a software license of some sort. Can you explain how that's structured?
Let me tie it all together because it's not just the expenses and it's not just the travel. And also something that we've got into recently is helping our card partners. And so it's an all-in-one solution for companies to manage their travel, expense, and card in one place. That's the ultimate value prop that developed over the course of the 6 years. And that's, I think, ultimately what allowed us to get to the point of acquisition is having that vision. And so that's kind of the journey in a nutshell, trying to encompass quite a bit in all of this. But
no, it was good.
Yeah, it's been pretty awesome.